All right. Whoa, now we, sorry.
You're muted.
Sorry, so is that better? Not as much echo? I'll try to sit further away from my iPad. All right, so proof of notification.
Agenda was posted.
All righty. Item number 3, approval of the agenda. We have a 10-point agenda today.
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda.
And
All
second.
right, motion by Supervisor Turk. I can second that. Second by Luck. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, we have a 10-point agenda. All right, item number 4, minutes of the December 16th, 2020 meeting. Was it December 16th, actually? All right, so then we have a chance to look at those meetings, or those minutes.
Yes, I can make a motion to approve.
All right, motion by Supervisor Glassbrenner,
I'll second.
second by Turk. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. All right, item number 5, discussion with Todd Romanesco, Calumet County Administrator. Mr. Romanesco, are you on?
I am here.
Perfect. All right, so I asked Mr. Romanesco to come and talk with us today to help us understand what the role of the clerk's office is in the finances, how that works when you have a separate finance HR department as well as a county administrator. I just thought that this would help us clarify how the different departments will interact with the clerk when we do this, once we have this transition finalized of Administrator Langrett's office of the HR and Finance. So, Mr. Romanesco, if you would like to just kind of run us through how things operate in your county, that would be a great place to start.
Sure, I can do that. I think just in reviewing some of the information that you've talked about already in Richland County, some of the things I have to mention are not unique to Calumet County. I would just put that out there. The clerk responsibilities can vary county to county, but their statutory authority and some specific areas are clearly identified. And in Calumet County, I can give you what the clerk currently is responsible for, and then I got a bit of a history lesson from our clerk and from others that have been here. Plus, I've been here for 25 years, so we do have a period of time when we went from an administrative coordinator to an administrator, and some of those responsibilities shifted from the county clerk responsibilities. So currently, the Calumet County clerk responsibilities are primarily county board support. So they are the official record keeper for many county functions, including acting as the secretary to the County Board of Supervisors. And I believe more recently, I can't remember exactly what year it was, they actually identify and appoint the secretaries for the operating committees within the county government. Our clerk also, based on statute, provides for issuing marriage licenses and other licenses, and the function of election administration. So they organize information about election rules, names of candidates for county offices and things. I won't bore you with those details, but you know that that's a primary function of the clerk's office. Things I did find out outside of that. So we have a history of shifting from county clerk responsibilities to other areas of the county government. And one of those areas would be that of a finance director. So in Calumet, we're organized by county administrator, and we do have a separate finance director and finance department. And we have a separate human resources director and human resources department. But the functions that had shifted from the clerk over time include things that had been a part of state statutes. So questions I had regarding apportionments, what does the clerk actually do with regard to apportionments for the municipalities? And in conversation, as we developed a finance department and a finance director here, those responsibilities really did shift to the finance director, but the clerk provides that information. So she accessed the secretary function for that to provide the information to the municipalities, but does not do anything beyond that. TIF reports, I'm not sure what it is in Richland County, but the TIF reports are all done through the state now. They're no longer through the county clerk's office, so that was a shift, at least since our clerk has been in office. Something else that's identified, rich aids is a specific example that had been identified under a county clerk, and that no longer is with our county clerk, but has shifted to the highway commissioner and the highway department. Veterans graves is another one. So the veterans graves now, it was through the clerk's office. It shifted to the veterans service officer, and the county here moved to perpetual care for those veterans graves. So that's no longer a function of the clerk. We also had a conversation regarding bookkeeping, because at one point in Calumet County, we did have bookkeepers and accounting staff in the clerk's office, which I was not aware of until I started asking questions for the purpose of discussing this with you today. And I was told that as the finance department was introduced to the county, they shifted bookkeeper and accounting responsibilities from the clerk's office to the finance department under a finance director. Other things outside of that, DMV and DNR, hunting licenses, things that aren't necessarily within statutory authority of the clerk's office, had been shifted over time as well. So if you did take a look at full-time equivalencies within these offices, I believe there was something that you had looked at statewide that indicated how many individuals actually work in the clerk's office. So as you can hear, my list of things that they currently are responsible for and responsibilities that had shifted out, we did reduce overall full-time equivalents from the clerk's office. I believe right now she has a 0.8 full-time equivalent deputy. We also had a conversation about a new incoming county clerk. So I've been here long enough that we've had a couple county clerks, and I realize that in Richland County you've had a clerk for an extended period of time, so you may not have experienced this, but we did have a conversation at that time when we had a new county clerk elected regarding that appointment piece of their deputy, because the statute is clear that they shall be able to appoint their deputy. The issue we had here is we had an existing employee who was serving in that role, and the clerk at the time, we indicated that this is who we have in the position now. And this also, the unique part of that is it was a union environment at the time, which is no longer the case. But I did have a conversation with the clerk about that and indicating, if you had chosen, the county has a position and has a person in the position, what if you were to choose that you wanted someone else? And at the time, the conversation the county had with the new incoming clerk is this is the person in the position. If you choose to appoint no one, the functions then will remain solely with the clerk. If you choose to appoint someone else, the county is not required to hire that individual and pay that individual at a deputy level for that position. And that is just an example of a conversation that had occurred in Calumet County without regard to what may have occurred in other areas in the state around that statutory authority to appoint their deputies. But we've had that in other elected positions as they come in. We have clear HR policies that support that as well, because they are a county employee, and if they are performing the functions without regard to any disciplinary action or need to terminate, that we would continue that continuity with that position and not eliminate the person. I did also look at some information. I mean, that's kind of how we're structured, Melissa, that those separate departments, responsibilities. Did you want me to get into anything that I haven't discussed in particular?
I guess I would maybe just like a little more detail as far as, is there any financial function that remains in the clerk's office?
No. So the clerk is the record keeper. So
right.
The clerk does not have any budgetary responsibilities, any financial, accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll. None of those functions exist within our clerk's office. The clerk solely is responsible for statutory authority within a county administrator form of government. And that, as I described, had shifted over time as Calumet County moved from a county board chair to an administrative coordinator, which was also outside of the clerk's office, to a county administrator. So the things that remain with the clerk as far as financial would solely be that individual's receipt of funds relating to the operations of their office. So the clerk does not participate in the development of the budget and does not participate in approving or identifying the expenditures that have been authorized by the county board through that budget process.
So how does their office being the keeper of the records, does your financial department just send them the reports for safekeeping, or how does them as a record keeper play into it?
All the financial records are the responsibility of the finance department as it relates to ongoing audited financial information. So that would, that's an extensive list that I'm not going to be able to describe, but the functioning of the finance department is to retain those records. The clerk retains the records from, such as the adopted budget, all the resolutions and county board actions or committee actions as it relates to the budget or financial matters. So they would keep those records. So when I indicate, financial, that is the financial record that they are keeping. They are not keeping any of the information that would be a part of the single audit. That's done through finance.
Okay,
and
thank you.
Those things are clear. If your attention hasn't been drawn to the Attorney General's opinion, which has existed for a long time. So there's the statutory authority for the clerk, but then there also is, of course, over time, though, as those authorities have been challenged when counties try to organize themselves differently. So in the case of going from a county board chair form to a county administrator form, you have things that will shift for the purposes of having a county administrator. And some of those things have already been brought to legal matters in terms of shifting some of those responsibilities from an elected office to an appointed administrator. And there is an Attorney General's opinion regarding that. And I would, if you don't have that, I could certainly share that. It's older, but it does indicate that the statutes do provide for a county administrator form of government, which does include an exact reference to budget, audit powers and authority to be performed by a finance director. So some of those things that may exist within the clerk's function shift if the county board chooses to do so based on your new form of government. And there has been an Attorney General's opinion, and I think it goes back to the 70s, the 80s.
Melissa, you're on mute.
Sorry. If you could share that with Mr. Langert, that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, and Clint, if you could share that with, for me, for sure, I'm guessing the rest of the group, I'd like that opinion too. I was unfamiliar with that one.
Yeah, Mr. Langert can forward it on to all of us.
Can I, while we have Administrator Romanesco here, can I just share what I have at the moment to make sure this is what we're referencing right here?
It's one of the ones we've already read.
1974-ish?
That's it. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so one other question that I had for you is, when I had talked to you before, we had talked about your experience with shared deputies. And so I kind of would like it if you could go over with us kind of the pros and cons of a deputy being shared between different departments.
So do you mean, Melissa, are you referring to if you shared a deputy between the county clerk and Register of Deeds or Treasurer's office?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so we don't have a specific deputized sharing between those departments at this time. We did, and so there's a past thing that had occurred here where they did share a deputy position was shared with a district attorney's office. So we had a split position with two separate position descriptions. Now we're moving into 2021 where we have a shared position between the treasurer and the Register of Deeds. Now, the Register of Deeds here has not officially identified that individual to be a deputy function, but in conversation with the Register of Deeds prior to creating that position, we had a conversation with her that this is the individual who's currently a 50% FTE, interested in more full-time work. Register of Deeds was asking for a full-time position, which we did not approve through the administrator's budget process, but offered this alternative. And she was willing and knew the individual, primarily in this case because the functions were similar from what the deputy was doing in the treasurer's office to the Register of Deeds. And the conversation was really around, can the two elected officials effectively share the person in terms of coverage and what work would need to be done. They're already basically, for all intents and purposes, physically located together. They are literally one step across the hall from one door to the other. So the individual would be able to function in both of those deputy roles efficiently as far as we were concerned. And we got agreement from Register of Deeds, and we had already had it from the treasurer because he had already had that person as a deputy. So some of the challenges that we've seen in sharing positions is coverage and working for two different bosses. If any of you can relate to working for one person and working for another could be very different. So the scheduling component could definitely be challenging, and we prefer not to do that, but in this case it worked out, and the elected officials were more than willing to support deputizing that individual in both areas. And I'm not sure, Melissa, if I got into any other detail on that when you and I spoke that you want me to refer to or elaborate on.
I mean, I guess from my perspective, and probably yours as well, I mean, the main positive, the pros for that would be obviously financial. Are there any other pros that would go along other than a financial savings?
Well, in this instance, it was for the employee as well, because we had an employee that was the 50% that wanted a full-time position. So we were able to retain an already qualified individual. That was beneficial for us and not having to go out and recruit. And we've also found over time those very part-time positions. So we make decisions based on financial and say, well, we're only going to allow you a 50% position, or we're only going to allow you a 60% position. But that's not the market today. That's not always ideal. It really narrows your ability to attract people to those positions, and then you don't keep them. That tends to be where we've run into those issues. So if you have an ability for cooperation between the departments for a single individual in a full-time capacity, it tends to be something that lasts much longer. And there's a lot of assumptions in there that the individuals that are co-supervising can work together, but certainly that was a win for us as far as the efficiency goes, and the cost savings, rather than hiring a full-time position in Register of Deeds where they really didn't need to build to that capacity. So it was a win-win as far as that goes.
So has that transition happened? Is it going well, or it's in the process still?
It has happened, and it is going well. So, I stress the fact, and I did this with the elected officials, and this would be to appointed officials. This could be between an elected and appointed official. It really takes the cooperation between the two supervisors or department heads, certainly. So we did that groundwork ahead of time, and we laid out the expectations ahead of time. The treasurer in this case and the Register of Deeds had a conversation ahead of doing the offer of employment to this individual about all of those things, down to, well, if she's working in the treasurer's office at the treasurer's desk, is she allowed to do Register of Deeds functions while she's there if she has time? I mean, we got into trying to make this as clear as we could for the employee and for the two departments so that there wasn't any miscommunication or misunderstanding. That is crucial in those shared positions.
Okay. Thank you. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add at all about either topic?
I don't think I do. I think I feel like I should be giving you more information or trying to be all this enlightening this afternoon, but I don't have any more other than kind of what I've already provided.
All right, great. No, it's been really helpful so far. Does any of the supervisors on the committee have any questions for Mr. Romanesco?
Yeah, this is Bob. I do. Looking at, you mentioned that the deputy, or the clerk appointing a deputy, that you have some policy for that, and I'm trying to understand that because the statute says every clerk shall appoint, and you're saying that that's not necessarily the case, or how are you working with that?
No, we would say that they shall appoint. Absolutely. We have HR policy, and I could certainly share that if I haven't already with Clint, regarding how the county hires. So if, for example, in this case, if we're talking about an individual that wouldn't pass our background, wouldn't pass our HR policies, we would have a concern as an employer on whether or not we would be required to bring that person on and hire that person. So that's what I was referring to. Or I was also referring to if you have an existing deputy and you have a new clerk elected, what does the county responsibility to find another position for the existing deputy if the incoming clerk does not want that individual? So I think we have solidified our HR policies around that. Now, that has not occurred. The conversation has occurred with an incoming clerk around this is who the county has as a position, because we have one person in the office. And it has always worked out. Obviously cooperation and understanding is the best way to go. But our HR policies, I would say, would be in place if we had a disagreement with regard to who we would put on payroll.
I think I'd like to see that. If you get that to Clint, I would like to see that, how you handle
Sure.
that policy.
Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Romanesco? All right, well, thank you so much. It's really helpful to try to get an understanding of how all these different departments interact at other counties. It just helps us clarify and give us look at our options. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Good luck.
Thanks. All right, so with that, I think we will move on to item number 6, current position duties of the accounts payable specialist. And I have asked Ms. Amy Lewis to attend this meeting. I haven't looked to see if she's actually on, but I believe she is. And I really wanted her to just walk us through kind of what she does on a day-to-day basis. And Clint, if you can share her job description just so that people have a clear idea of what her current job description entails, that would be fantastic. Amy, are you on?
I'm here.
Welcome. Thank you for agreeing to attend this today. And so I think really it would just be great if you could just kind of run us through what your main duties are, how long it takes you to do the different things that you do.
Okay. I pay a lot of bills. We have about 100 different key accounts, and within those, there's thousands of expenditure lines. So each bill that comes to my desk, I'm responsible to making sure they get coded to the correct expense account. Some departments give those how they want them spent, some don't. So I usually have to go through and check each one of those. I looked this morning to see how many checks I write a year, and it's close to 6,000 a year, totaling $35 million. There's kind of two groups of bills that I pay. I have the utility bills and the credit card bills, which I will pay those when I get them because we don't want late fees. I don't want to hold those for audit because it's a mess if one of them gets paid late. Of those utility bills and credit bills, there's about 60 different accounts that I pay out of. Try to keep track. I have a spreadsheet with the dates that they come in so that if somebody's missing, like turning in a credit card bill or something, I try to notify them so they can get it to me. When I get them late, like a phone bill that maybe has 20 to 40 different expense accounts on it, it takes hours to get it fixed with the vendor. I also check, with audit, then the other set of bills is audit, and I pay, audit's always the third Monday of the month. Some department heads turn their bills into me during the month. So when I have a little free time, I work on those vouchers. Others turn all their bills in at one time. Like the sheriff's department turns theirs in to me right before their committee meeting, and I get them vouchered, and then Amber and I are on the same page as to having everything paid out of the correct expense accounts. She takes them to her committee, they approve them, and then she brings them back, and I enter them into the system right now. That's typically the job of the accounting supervisor, but for the since September, that's been my job as well. The audit bills, I check invoice date. This time of the year, you have to be very careful as to if it goes into 2020 or 2021. There's different coding when I enter those. Check that there's been no tax. If the tax is on there, I need to get a tax exempt form filled out, and I submit that with a payment. Check, I got notes, sorry. One of the big things is to check to make sure that it's following the board rules, or if it goes along with the resolution. A lot of times the resolution will be passed for X amount of dollars and the bill comes in higher than that. So then I get the privilege of upsetting the department head and having them have to go back and get that resolution changed. Vendors, I should probably tell you about my vendors. We have over 2,500 vendors. And that's kind of a time-consuming job as far as making sure addresses are the same. There's a lot of companies now that are doing business as, so there's a lot of cross-checking and a lot of cheat notes on my desk as to how you pay them. And then making sure that each expense is coded for a 1099 if they are a 1099 vendor. So then at the end of the year, I do the 1099s, which is what I'm working on this week. That's probably about that for audit. I do probably every day get a request for someone to research an older invoice. Today, while I was vouchering something, I got a call, someone asking if I could check to see if a conference was paid for from last January. So I do a little detective work to check to see if it was paid or not. And usually a few times a week I have a canceled check because someone maybe did a double payment on something or the check just wasn't needed. And a lot of times if the check's lost in the mail, it's the reissuing. So that takes up some time. And as far, I know that some, I can tell you that in 4 or 5 minutes, but it is actually about 80 to 90% of my workload. I don't know what, do you want to ask questions about any of the other things? I looked at the job description and there are a few things in there that I don't do. We no longer do the DNR licenses. Elections is a big part when we are having an election. So last year was huge. And we do I take care of like all the addresses and the perpetual care. I do that. I don't believe that was on the job description. So I don't know. Does anyone have questions?
I think that 80 to 90% of your workload being in the financial aspects is a lot of what we're focused on, because those are all duties that I think we've been moving towards transitioning those over into the county administrator's office. So generally what you would say is you spend a majority of your time doing mostly financial related duties.
Yes.
Okay. And you do have some capacity to do other administrative type duties?
I have to cram it in there. So, but the last week, because audit is the third Monday of the month, usually at the end of that third week is when I can kind of get caught up on all the other things. But if you look at those duties, they're things that are almost an interruption to my day. So if someone comes in and needs a marriage license, I do have to stop on my finances and I do have to do the marriage license. All the other things are just things that kind of get put in there as I'm doing my financial stuff.
Okay. Does anyone from the committee have specific questions for Amy?
Madam Chair, may I?
Yes, please.
Amy.
Yes.
I have 2 questions. In your opinion, what you do now, is it a full-time equivalent? In other words, are you employed full-time right now?
Yes.
Yes. when there is an election in the county, Amy, how many people does it require to run an election? For instance, like the last presidential election in November.
That was difficult because we didn't have our deputy who would help Victor. It is a lot of hours with the elections. It's a big thing. And now with the absentee, the way they record those and stuff, it has added like twice as much work in our office. So at election time, it is like a full-time job for everybody.
It's all hands on deck.
It is. And it's priority.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question of you, actually? So when we originally talked about this position and we were going over each position that was currently in the county clerk's office and whether they, kind of breaking it down by what is statutory and what is more finance and HR, I had on my notes that this position, all of it was statutory county clerk. However, now with this discussion with Mr. Romanesco, and which I haven't read that Attorney General's opinion, but I guess is the thought here that some of these financial things could shift as well?
Right. So when we originally looked at this job description, we hadn't spoken with Amy yet. So I was unaware, and I think many of the other committee members were probably unaware that even though her job description, duty-wise, if you just look at the bulleted duty points, it appears that it's mostly clerk statutory function duties. What is the reality is that it's mostly a financial functioning position. So that's why we are having this conversation today, because we have realized that this position actually entails a lot of financial duties that are going to need to be shifted to the county administrator's office. And there's two ways to do that. One would be to shift the position, or one would be to shift just those duties and leave the rest of the job description behind in the county clerk's office. So yes, you're correct. That was our original thought when we looked through these initially. And obviously, as we've gathered more information, that has changed. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have any further questions for Amy? All right. Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. It's incredibly helpful. And I would encourage you to probably listen in on the rest of the conversations, because maybe we'll have questions as we move through what Mr. Langrick is going to present next, okay?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so with that, I think we should move on to number 7, timeline and transition of functions from the county clerk's office to the county administrator's office. Mr. Langrick sent this to us today. It's a lot to digest, but it's a really great document that I think gives us a really good place to start. And I do think that there's probably a few things we may want to take action on today. So I will turn it over to Mr. Langrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, in kind of trying to entertain items 6, 7, and 8 and bringing those, the many points of those together, a few different possible motions, actions to consider here today. The first one being to recommend a transition plan and directives to the Finance and Personnel Committee with the amendments that would reflect your decisions and discussion points of today. The next 3 possible motions would include to recommend the creation of a new deputy clerk position with the position description, necessary amendments to the employee handbook and authorization table. Another possible motion would include recommend a transfer of an accounts payable specialist position to the county administrator with amended position description and necessary amendments to the employee handbook and authorization table. And another possible motion would include, again, pending discussion, amending or repealing an ordinance number 2026, which is the ordinance in place right now that gives additional duties to the county clerk regarding insurance, oversight on the daily financials, etc., which amended previous resolutions that captured the functions of the administrative coordinator. The background on these items to consider today is in efforts of addressing timelines, functions, establishment of employees, a transition plan and directives is proposed to the committee to review, amend, and recommend as seen appropriate. The plan is intended to, first off, establish county board intentions, second, give directives to staff, and 3, to establish the decisions and communication process through the committees. Through the review of this plan, decisions and possible motions regarding the deputy clerk position, the accounts payable position, ordinance number 2026, as we just discussed, and directives to the staff is intended. So again, this is a draft type of a policy presented here today to help kind of guide the discussion, and we'll take it kind of in piece, and it'll hopefully help kind of also guide the remaining decision points that should or could be addressed. And then a follow-on possible action would be decisions regarding the statutory requirements of the deputy clerk and the disposition of accounts payable specialists. Pending discussion with staff and recommendations from the committee, position descriptions can be amended or created to recommend to finance and personnel. So all that being said, we'll move to a lengthy document. As said, some of the pieces here we've discussed in previous meetings. Some of it is kind of new. All of it is again intended to capture your intentions as a committee and to also capture feedback and such of a feasible plan coming from staff. So the first part of this is an outcome statement. Be therefore resolved that the Richland County Administrator's Office and Richland County Clerk Office, with help of supporting offices, departments, and organizations, will transfer the human resources, HR, and financial functions of the clerk's office to the administrator's office no later than a time to determine as a decision point, in accordance with the transition plan and directives, in efforts to support the county's strategic goal and vision of changing to administrator form of government. This kind of goes along then with the intentions of the board. And again, this is for you folks to kind of decide and chew on, and then recommend to finance and personnel for resolution on how we envision the intentions of the board, or what we're proposing to the board to adopt as their intentions. County Board's intentions statement. With the adoption of this plan, it is the intentions of the Richland County Board to have the organizational functions of the county financials and HR currently managed by the Richland County Clerk transferred to the management of the county administrator. The end state of this transition will be a system that reflects daily oversight and management of financials and human resources performed by the county administrator, with established access for the county clerk to ensure all statutory duties can be fulfilled in the keeping of accurate records, necessary to authorize payments, a portion of taxes, etc. It is the county board's intentions to adjust personnel, assignments, work areas, equipment, authorizations, etc. to carry out this transition. It is the intentions of the county board that the following principles are prioritized in the execution of this transition. Number 1, to minimize disruption to financial and HR operations. 2, to retain all employees assigned to these functions and to utilize their knowledge. 3, transfer functions, personnel, work areas, etc. in a responsible manner. 4, monitor progress by committee. And 5, report problems accompanied with recommended solutions. The board passed resolution for the administrative model and has tasked financial and HR functions via job description. Follow-on action that we're looking then is resolution language that adopts this plan. And Madam Chair, I guess I'd like to pause here on this first section and kind of ensure that in kind of setting the context for the remainder of the plan, this is the visualized intentions. Madam Chair.
Thank you. When I read this over, I felt like it really did capture what our intent has been in getting this transition done. So I didn't have any specific comments other than fixing a few typos. Other supervisors, did you have any comments? Okay, yeah, I'm going to go with everyone is in agreement that this is the intentions of what we would like to accomplish.
Madam Chair, this is Bob Frank. I have a question.
Yeah, go, please.
So my question is, it is talking here also about space, and obviously I'm coming into this relatively new, moving staff and space. Has that been a discussion, or are we looking at moving forward on something when we don't have space allocated to reassign and move and position people?
Madam Chair, would you like me to address that, or?
Yes, please.
Okay. There's kind of two parts to it, and it is kind of covered down in here, which we will get to. But to answer Supervisor Frank's questions, the space element of it is kind of visualized as a computer room being reassigned to myself, which action by the county board took place in January to reauthorize future use of this for the administrator, and then visualizing then for the existing staff to kind of remain in their current seats, and that the county clerk's work floor area become a kind of co-use joint work area.
Thank you. I had not not understood that and gotten to that. Thank you.
So, Mr. Langreich, just to clarify, what you have here is the follow-up action of resolution language that adopts this plan. Are you thinking that we would adopt this plan in full and all of these other sub-follow-up actions within it would then be included, or are we going to be taking the plan itself and then also these separate follow-up actions individually?
Well, I guess I've got a couple notes in here that you'll see in yellow, which is kind of just to help kind of explain how I visualize or propose it could be done. And with this one, it's just kind of stating on here that a resolution to adopt this plan would include all the details with it, and it would also then kind of firm up what the intentions of the county board are. If we get in a position where we're kind of stuck or we need more clarification on the details, I guess at that point it would be my recommendation then that we pull out the pieces that we can, like the intentions piece, to kind of move that forward, so it kind of helps us have something to anchor future decisions on, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, in a perfect world, it'd be nice to just adopt the entire thing, but I do actually think it might be helpful and expedient to pull out the things that you've highlighted and take action on them separately, as well as adopting this plan. The intention of the board part of the plan, I think, is what you were saying.
That is correct, Madam Chair.
All right, well, with that, do you want to move on to, and I don't know that you have to necessarily read everything word for word, but definitely bring out the highlights of each section, and then if people have specific questions.
Yes, Madam Chair. The next section here is just to try to help define the process that we're kind of working through and that's been put in place by resolution language. Initially, this was kind of drafted using the words phases, but as it might be interchangeable and we might be backing up to readdress different issues, I've kind of changed it more into initiatives. The first initiative being what we're doing right now, investigation and planning with the administrative committee. You'll see the language here that kind of is what is established by resolution as what your tasks are. It's visualized then that this initiative is kind of completed when all recommendations have been made to the standing committees, the finance and personnel and rules and resolutions committees. But obviously it could be reinitiated if one of those standing committees has need or question or is looking for a recommendation from you folks. With all recommendations then made to those standing committees, you would hit a recommendation and resolution type of a initiative, where the two committees then, by authority granted in the statute or the structure resolution, are then evaluating and making resolutions for change to the county board. The next initiative then is kind of then the transition and monitoring phase, where we would still have the finance and personnel committee monitoring the transition of efforts through monthly reports, and then giving advice again by duty of what their assignments are underneath the structure document, and seeking out to other committees or again to this committee for recommendations if there's issues that need to be addressed. And then we'd hit a completion and reporting where we'd have finance and personnel and rules and resolutions delivering a final report when the transition is determined to be complete. And then we would have had a successful transition is the plan. So I would then turn it back to yourself, Madam Chair, to just kind of make sure that we're all in agreement on how the decision process works and how we want information to flow through the committees to resolution by the board.
Thank you. I think that is incredibly well laid out. Does any of the committee members have any questions or concerns about how he's laid this out here?
Chair, I don't have questions or concerns, but I just want to recognize Administrator Langrick's efforts here. I think this is the kind of information that the rest of the board has been looking for from us. So thank you so much for pulling this together in a concise format.
Absolutely. Agree.
Certainly.
So with that, I think we should move on to the objectives and directives. This is where we may have some action items we need to take today.
The first objective here is the office space of the county administrator, which again is one of your defined goals from the resolution. The vision at hand is to utilize the existing space of the county clerk's office with the mindset that it is the least disruptive. The county board this month did take action to reassign the computer room right here to the administrator. And again, the follow-on action here, or the follow-on vision would be to share the workspace that is currently designated to the county clerk, with essentially keeping our tenured employees in their seats and just having a joint work area. The different subtasks that kind of go along with this is currently the computer room is designated to store a computer, and in moving the computer system, there's several other variables that would have to be teased out and investigated to find an alternative space for it, as our current configuration also kind of requires us to touch it on a daily basis for backup. That's another bit that has to be explored. Looking to have resolution on this entire project by May, of having a solution found for the computer and the room prepared for the administrator to move in. So we did have County Board Resolution 2113 that did assign the county room to the administrator. Again, following action would be adoption of this plan would direct a joint use of the open work floor, which may be appropriate. And again, if the plan isn't adopted in its entirety, it could be in a section that's taken out and resolution language drafted to capture that bit of it. Madam Chair.
I guess before we go any further, I would like to hear from the rest of the committee as to their comfort with passing this entire document. Therefore, all these action items would happen as part of that.
Madam Chair.
Or we are not comfortable with that and we really need more time to look at this document as a whole, but then would therefore pass some of these individual action items.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Chair Brewer.
Yes. We have been at this task for several months now, well over a year. And it's time to get down the road. And I support these recommendations and ultimate motions and resolutions wholeheartedly. Furthermore, we've got to post job applications, get postings out there for 2 jobs. One would be the county clerk deputy, and the other would be our administrative manager, director, whatever, because both of those things are duties that we have upon us and before us. We are responsible for the things that those people would do. Victor cannot accomplish what he has to do statutorily without help in his office. I see that he needs a deputy and he should be able to get one, and we should move without any more delay and get this done. Thank you.
Right. All right. Thank you for that. Does any other supervisor have comments at this time on the comfort with basically passing this entire plan as a whole, or whether we need to parse some things out?
Madam Chair, while I would agree with Chair Brewer that there's an urgency with time, I feel that there's a few things in this document that have, for example, just down below, well, he's at it right now with the decision point. There's some questions as to how we're going to answer some of these things that we need to do. So I don't understand how we can pass this whole document when some of the things are not clear.
All right, so maybe the best way to handle this would be to go through the entire document, and then we'll come back, and if we decide we want to pass anything individually, we can, or whether we want to pass the whole document. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Langford, if you would like to continue.
Certainly, Madam Chair. The next section is our objective for reestablishment of county employee positions. And looking at our previous actions, how we were going to be configured as of January 1st or 31st of January 31st of this year is we would have an accounting supervisor, deputy county clerk, a payroll benefits specialist, and an accounts payable specialist underneath the county clerk position. Action that we took at the last county board meeting, we did reauthorize or reappropriate or reestablish two positions to report to the county administrator position. So we are right here as of February 1st. The remaining question then and discussion is, well, then how do we account then for having a deputy county clerk position made available for the county clerk, of which we also kind of talked about with Administrator Romanesco today. And then what happens with our accounts payable specialist or a clerical assistant position that we had kind of talked about at the previous meetings. So the county board passed resolution number 2114, moving two positions to the administrator. Follow-on actions. Action is needed on addressing the needs of the clerk and the assignment of the accounts payable position and functions. Options may include position designated as county as deputy under the clerk, a new position, shared position, or some other type of resolution to solve this. And I would turn it over to yourself, Madam Chair, to discuss and kind of let me know where you'd like to go and where the committee stands on a recommendation to solve this last bit of the employee roles and titles piece of it, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Langrick. So I struggled with this because on the one hand, creating a deputy county clerk position in the clerk's office while transferring the financial accounts payable specialist position completely over to the administrator solves a lot of problems. It is the least probably stressful way to handle this situation. These have been difficult conversations to have, to say the least. My concerns, I guess, are, one, if we move that accounts payable specialist position over, will the county administrator have someone who will be able to have time to help with his administrative needs, which is something we've talked about on and off through this whole process, is that the county administrator has a very, very full plate, and we've just shifted HR and finance over, which is great, but he also needs some administrative assistant help. And will that help be available with these three positions that would, in theory, be transferred? So that's my one big concern, is we still may not have enough help for him on the administrative level. On the other hand, we also have, we've heard from Mr. Romanesco and from other areas whether, is the deputy clerk position a full-time position? Amy is describing how little time she was spending, except during elections, which are a completely different situation. So I guess those would be the things that I'd like to hear other supervisors talk about, what are their thoughts on this, moving the accounts payable specialist over and creating a new deputy. The other hesitation I have is we we cut a position last year. We are not in great financial situation where if we're adding a position, we want to try to give raises. So there's a lot here, and adding another position is something I'm not completely comfortable with at this point.
Madam Chair.
Would anyone else like to comment?
I'm sorry, was someone else commenting? I heard a Madam Chair.
No, I think you go ahead.
Okay. So I guess my question would be, when we relook at all of these different position descriptions and the fact that the majority of the finance and HR can be moved over, including if we're looking at the accounts payable specialist, when we look at what is still retained for county clerk statutory duties, including, which I know is a different situation and we might have to have a different conversation about that, but during election time, I guess what I'm wondering is in the day-to-day for a typical year, maybe excluding the election part, we'd have to have another discussion about that. How much time do we need allotted for deputy clerk? Because from hearing from Mr. Romanesco, I think he said they have a 0.8 employee for deputy clerk. And if I'm correct, I mean, I don't think it would have to be necessarily full-time, but I don't really have an understanding. Does it need to be a full-time position? Has anyone looked at that? How many hours we would need?
So at this point, Amy, if you're still on, I mean, could you give us a feel for how much time any of the three of you, the accounting supervisor, the payroll benefits specialist, and yourself, other than elections, which, Ingrid, if you'll note, later in the document, it talks about how the administrator would provide help during elections. He would provide staff either from his own staff or from somewhere else in the county to help with elections. But
I did see that.
Amy, can you just give us an idea of, in your opinion, how things currently work, how much time is spent by any of the three of you doing clerk duties? Maybe she's not here anymore. I mean, so based on what she told us previously, she spends 80+% of her time doing the financial stuff, which would be transferred out, and that would mean 20% of her time would be spent doing clerk duties. I don't know. The payroll and benefits specialist had a few items in her description that did talk about clerk duties, which mostly had to do with elections. And the accounting supervisor position only had the one line, which was serve as deputy or serve as clerk in the clerk's absence. So,
Madam Chair,
those, I would say that it does not justify a full-time position. But again, I think we need to have further conversation about that.
Madam
Any
Chair?
other supervisors have comments?
Madam Chair.
Oh, there's Amy.
I'm here. I can't really speak for the position that Derek held. I know there was a lot of things that I just don't know what they did, honestly, and hour-wise, how many per week. But I do know there was a lot of backup things if, we did not have the county clerk, some pretty essential duties. So that would be something, I guess, with Victor to ask him how many hours.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. As I'm listening to the discussion here, I think we're getting too far in the weeds. We need to move forward and make some change. I would submit that we can get into details of who is spending how much time on what after we get the ball rolling for the initial changes. In the interim, it would seem to be the most quickest way to move forward and the cleanest way to move forward would be to move the two positions to the county administrator, create the deputy for the county clerk, realizing that Victor is only one body. Anytime we have Victor taking minutes for us or doing something else, anybody who needs a clerk service, there needs to be a deputy there and available. So I think we can sort out the details of what that position becomes in the future as we go along and get more accustomed to the transition. The issue of whether Mr. Langrick would have enough administrative support or not, we don't know yet. Likely, probably not, but he's going to have more than he has now, so that's progress. I think we need to keep taking steps in this direction. That's kind of what I said at the county board meeting when we passed the resolutions that we did. These were a first step. We need to take a next step now. I don't think we can try to get everything perfect as we're taking steps, otherwise we'll never move.
But Mr. Turk, if I can interject, I think isn't the question now not that we're not moving those two positions, because we are, but now the third position, which was currently left in the county clerk's office, with this new information, 80 to 90% of that is actually what would fall under county administrator. So my impression was we're trying to decide what are we doing with that position, and then where does that leave deputy clerk? Am I correct in stating that, Melissa?
And my thought would be we need to take whatever steps to make sure we have, we were dealing with 3 positions. Okay, so our broad vision was moving 2 to the administrator and leaving 1 with the clerk. Let's figure out what we need to do to make that happen so that everything is organized as it should be for the moment. And then we can determine, okay, is a full-time position really necessary there? Can it be split up and shared somewhere else? But let's get that position established and filled first. And with the administrator, if 2 positions are there, is there more support he needs? Well, we can deal with that, but let's get the 2 people established first.
Are you comfortable with creating a new position of deputy clerk and then the third position would be moved, the current accounts payable specialist position would be moved to the county administrator's office? So essentially we're hiring a new position.
It seems that we have to take some kind of action to create a position of deputy county clerk, whether that's renaming, reclassifying, whatever we're doing. I don't think we want to create an extra position at this point, but we need to take whatever action is appropriate so we've got the 3 positions that are existing divvied up the way that we envision doing it.
Yeah, this is Bob. I'm very concerned about adding a new position without having some foresight as to why we're doing it and what that job description is. Deputy clerk is definitely a necessary position. How we manage the accounts payroll specialist, or if there's a way we can share deputy clerk positions, maybe that's the topic. But I'm concerned about, as you said, with the budget, we jump in and now we have a new position we have to pay for and hire and benefits and everything else that down the road we
well, that was
plan for.
That was essentially my point with why I brought up how many full-time or how many hours do we need as deputy clerk? Because if we're looking at the different options that are laid here, which would be create a new position, which you're saying that probably wouldn't be in their best interest, moving that accounts payable specialist over, but then does that require a sharing of position there in order to give the county clerk the ability to continue to be able to appoint a deputy clerk? Wouldn't be full-time hours, but would we, I guess that's what I feel like we're all trying to do the same thing, just talking about it in different language.
Agreed.
So just to clarify, what Mr. Langrick is proposing, he is proposing that we move the accounts payable specialist position over as a 40-hour-a-week position to his office, and then we create a new position in the county clerk's office. Whether it's full-time, part-time, whatever, we would still be creating a new position. So that's what's on the table in this document at this point. If we don't do that, if we try to move all the financial duties from that accounts payable specialist position into the administrator's office and leave the rest of that accounts payable specialist position in the clerk's office, so what my original thought was we could potentially share. So that person could be 50% the administrator to do the financial stuff and 50% for the clerk's office to do clerk duties. I'm not sure that that's enough time allocated for the financial stuff, given the statements that Amy has made today about how much time it takes to do the financial stuff. So I'm to the point where I'm not sure how we can accomplish what we need to accomplish, which is I think we all agree we need to move the financial functions of that position out of the clerk's office and into the administrator's office. But how do we do that without having to create a new position? Anyone have any other ideas?
Who's currently doing what is under the accounting supervisor, the duties that are under there, because we don't have anyone in that position. So there are a lot of financial things that are covered under that particular position, which is why we're moving it to the county administrator. Who's currently doing those things?
Mr. Langer, can you answer that question, please?
To the best of my knowledge, right now, Victor himself is covering down on a lot of the different journal entries into the financial system.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to, I guess, note at this point that, because I don't believe Victor is on this call, is that correct? I just wanted to point out that he's been invited to several of these meetings, and he was invited to this meeting as well, knowing we were going to be talking about the deputy position, and he's not here. So it would be nice to be able to answer these questions for us, but he is not here, so.
Well, my question, I guess, would be, is there a way to combine some of what Amy is currently doing? It would basically be a reshuffling around of these position descriptions in order to create a position, or to have a position where you could actually share deputy clerk and financial duties. But without Victor's input, that might be difficult to answer.
I like the idea of the reshuffle. Adding the position concerns me at this point. It would be nice to see a shared position, a shared deputy position, how the clerk would appoint somebody and then share that. I guess that's going to be our challenge.
So are we in agreement that we want to move and need to move the financial duties from the accounts payable specialist position out? And given that it's been stated how long that takes to do, it's essentially a full-time job with maybe a little time left to do some administrative stuff for this. So are we, at this point, are we comfortable saying that we want to move that position to the administrator's office? And we need to have further discussion about what position is available.
The position or the duties?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good clarification.
So we've already moved 2 positions, right?
We have. That's official. The accounting supervisor and the payroll benefits specialist positions have been fully moved. Having removed the few duties in there that were clerk statutory duties from there, just removing those from their job descriptions. The accounts payable specialist position, if you look at the top, what is it, the top 5 bulleted items? 1, 2, 3, 4. Top 4 bulleted items, I think, are where a majority of the financial duties lie. I guess are we in agreement that that position should be moved, and it should be moved as a full-time position to the administrator's office?
Well, I think Mr. Turk brought up a good point. Position or the descriptions of the position, because I feel like if we look at these 3 and we take out the parts that are statutorily remain in the county clerk, is there a way that we could redo the position descriptions on these so that what is left with the deputy clerk position takes all of the statutory requirements from for example, on payroll and benefits specialist, I believe almost all of that, except for the last 3 bulleted items you said were financial and HR. And then with the accounting supervisor, almost all of it is financial, except for the first couple and the last couple of bullet points. Is there a way that we could, I guess, redo these position descriptions so that we have 2 concise finance and HR positions within the, I mean, I know it's not that simple, but if we're trying to do this without creating a new position and potentially share some duties.
I think the complication is that, so are you suggesting that the accounts payable specialist duties get shifted over and added to the accounting supervisor and the payroll and benefits specialist positions?
Right.
My understanding is that the accounting supervisor position and the payroll benefits specialist would not have time to take on what Amy does 80% of her time. That seems unreasonable to me.
Correct. Right now,
40 hours, how many hours? I can't do math in my head, but spending 30 some hours doing financial stuff, if you were to dump that onto the payroll and benefits and the accounting supervisor positions, I just can't see how that, and I think that my understanding is that they were pretty thinly staffed anyway, that there's a lot of financial stuff that is very complicated and takes a lot of time, and we're already at a very minimally staffed financial.
I guess that's my point, is that this would still require a third person. But what that looks like as far as that third person potentially sharing deputy clerk, as well as some of those things that are currently being covered by, I guess, Victor. I'm still a little confused by who exactly is covering all of the accounting supervisor position things at the moment. So I'm not saying that we don't need a third person. We do. I'm just saying, what does that look like as far as where these position descriptions go?
Okay. I guess I'm struggling because I think we've covered it. I think what we've said is that there really should be three financial and HR, between HR and finance, there should be 3 positions in the county administrator's office. And it doesn't sound like there's a lot of time for that accounts payable specialist person to be shared with. That was like I said, that was my original thought, was that perhaps we could have the accounts payable specialist be 50-50, 50% county administrator for financial and 50% county clerk for deputy clerk duties. I'm not seeing that is potentially feasible, given
Madam
how
Chair.
much time is spent financial. Yes, go ahead.
I have to take the recommendations of the person closest to this, besides Victor, and that would be Clint Langrick. And he's recommending that we do it this way. And he is loath to recommend that we hire an additional person because he set out a budget. He liked the budget that we adopted. It was the cleanest process we've had in years. And yet, here we are at the point where we are probably most likely going to recommend that we hire an additional person. And I think for years, and correct me if I'm wrong, but for years, the office of the county clerk has basically been understaffed. They've gotten a lot of work done, but basically they needed more people when they had the accounting function, when they had the HR function, and they were getting the job done, but perhaps it wasn't being done comfortably. I think it was being done well in most cases, but in many cases it wasn't, and that's why we changed over to the administrator form of government. And I've thought about this, I've mulled about it over, I've lost sleep about it, and I think that our only way out of this, and maybe the best way, is to allow Vic to hire a deputy clerk and assign all the other functions and all the other people over to Clint. Then we've gotten Clint over on the right side of the wall finally. There's going to be an assimilation process. Then beyond this, I can only imagine, but I think that it will work if we give it enough time. Thanks.
Mr. Langer, can you give me an idea of where you foresee the money coming to pay for a new position in the clerk's office, whether it be full or part-time?
We'd have to be looking for an apportionment from undesignated. I don't have the capacity built into my 2021 budget, and Victor did not add another position to his 2021 budget.
I would have a concern with that, considering that we don't have the third person right now. I feel like this is a discussion, if we have a third person and we figure out where that person fits into this, before we start talking about adding a fourth position. Perhaps the answer would be to share a position between the accounting supervisor and the deputy clerk, which currently is not filled. So if we could fill that, is there a way to share those two positions right now? Because as we've already stated, Victor is, which I'm not saying is ideal, but Victor is doing a lot of what the accounting supervisor duties were on there anyways. So we aren't sure what that would look like with a third person in there covering those duties and potentially sharing deputy clerk.
I guess I need your clarification. Are you talking about the accounts payable specialist sharing with the clerk's office? Or
No.
the accounting supervisor position, that currently is vacant?
Correct, because we moved the accounting supervisor position. But in my understanding from what we've said is that most of that right now, because it's not filled, is currently being fulfilled by Victor. So I guess what I'm proposing is, since we don't have that third position, and if we hire that third position, is that potentially something that could be shared between accounting supervisor and deputy clerk?
I guess I would have to say that I don't think that that's the position that should be shared. I realize that Clerk Vlasic is doing those duties right now. But if anything was shared, it would make more sense to me, because the accounts payable specialist in their job description certainly has more clerk duties assigned to it. So in my mind, it doesn't make sense to share that accounting supervisor position, but to share the accounts payable specialist position.
Madam Chair, if I can make a comment again, and this isn't to
Yes.
To overly sway or anything of that nature, but just to kind of put it in context from my previous experiences, coming from Clark County and Greene County. Now, both of those counties had larger populations, but as size of their organizational structure, they operated with just about the same amount of employees, perhaps a little bit less with considerations for LTs and full-times and things of that nature. But both of these counties operated with a sizable nursing home operation. So in Clark County, the clerk's office operated with a clerk and a deputy. I served as the human resources manager, and I had an assistant. I wore a second hat as the administrative coordinator there. And then finance had a controller, they had an accountant, and then they also had their accounts receivable, payable type of specialist. So they rolled with about 7 people in the realm of clerk, HR, and financial. At Greene County, the clerk's office there had a county clerk with a deputy and an assistant, so they had 3. They had I worked there as the director. I was the HR director with an assistant, so there was 2 there. And then finances had a financial officer, an accountant, and then a receivable payable specialist. So in those 3 types of departments, we rolled with 8. In Richland County, we have 1 clerk. In an HR function, we have myself and Tammy as a payroll and benefit specialist. And then in a financial, we have an accountant position that's vacant and a receivable payable, so 5. So, and again, it's not apples to apples, but in like an organizational type of a size type of a thing, it's comparable in my opinion. So we're kind of trying to do with 5 what in previous experiences I've had we've done with 8 or we've done with 7. And again, this isn't it's the same type of a thing, because it is less population and potentially less services coming to access some of these types of deals. But from an organizational perspective on trying to manage payroll and trying to manage the accounts receivables and payables for 20 departments, again, we're operating at 5 with what my previous experiences have been trying to operate with 8 or 7. Madam Chair.
You're on mute, Melissa.
Sorry, I keep forgetting which one I'm on. Dave, if you could mute your mic, I think it was your papers we were hearing rustling there for a little while. But I do think that's helpful to understand and reiterate the point that we are somewhat understaffed in our financial and payroll positions as far as how much employee time we have available for those tasks. So I'm hearing two very distinct recommendations here. So I guess one of the compromises that I'm thinking that we could potentially do today to try to continue to move forward, but give us a little more time to maybe flesh out some of these ideas. I mean, maybe one of the ways we could move is to have designate the accounts payable specialist as 50-50 right now, realizing that that's not perfect. But that would leave a position in the county clerk's office right now for him to have available for clerk duties, but would also begin the transition of the financial aspects of that position until we can figure out potentially where money might come from to cover a new position, if that's the route we want to go. Try to get our clerk to give us an indication of what his expectations are and what he's looking for in a deputy clerk position description. I don't know. I guess that's where I'm at right now. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Madam Chair, if I can make the recommendation, perhaps if we can continue kind of moving through the document, and as you talked about, circling back to this topic, obviously I don't know if we're going to be able to solve it today right at the moment, but if I can kind of move through the other types and pieces of it, it might spark other thoughts and opportunities or other things we didn't think about to help us solve this problem.
That sounds fine with me, as long as it's okay with the rest of the committee.
That's fine. Come back.
All right. Proceed.
Okay, bear with me as I try to find my share button on my multiple windows here. Okay, so then and then tracking our different directives here for moving the employees, we have taken action through the county board to have two of the positions moved effective February 1st. We do have the recruitment effort for the accounting supervisor is currently underway, posted with anticipating all applications to be received by February 10th, hoping to interview on February 19th, and an anticipated start date for the position of March 18th. So we have action to try to fill that position. Moving into a review then on the different functions. The ones in yellow then are again potential action items to take place. Currently, if we are going to adopt the intentions of the board to have daily oversight and management of financials transition to the administrator, we currently have ordinance number 2026 that still directs the county clerk to monitor implementation of adopted budget to assure all expenditures of the county funds are made in compliance with allocations of the budget. The same ordinance then directs the clerk to assist the county administrator in preparation of the annual budget. The same ordinance then also directs the county clerk to administer the various insurance programs of the county. Work with finance personnel committee to see the insurance coverage is solicited and adequate to protect the county from financial loss. So these three tasks right here are assigned to the clerk by ordinance. The next section we have reviewed as a committee before, might be new to Marty and to Bob, but the next sections here are what is defined by state statute 5923 on the clerk's responsibilities here in blue. And then these duties also then you can visualize as potentially falling to a deputy position as the cover down for those. The different functions then that are captured by the current administrator position description are listed here then on page number 11. You're looking at some budgeting functions on the top three, some financial types of functions in the middle three, and then some HR types of functions on the bottom four. And presumably it's the intentions to keep these with the administrator, but again, looking to affirm as some of the expectations currently assigned by position description to the administrator kind of also are double tasked to the county clerk by means of ordinance number 2026. And so follow-on action is looking for a decision amending or repealing ordinance number 2026 is appropriate. If the daily oversight of financials is to be placed under the administrator, a decision on insurance is also needed. Does the function stay with the clerk, or is the function transferred to the administrator? And with this also then kind of does touch on the conversation just previously had with how it would work with an accounts payable specialist, and if that position is shared or if that position is kind of double slotted then as the deputy. That would also be another discussion piece that I'd be interested in receiving guidance on, Madam Chair.
Can you put up ordinance 20-26 just so we can see the language that's in it? I mean, my
Yes.
understanding is that it seems appropriate that we would repeal the entire ordinance because we have described both the insurance and financials in the job description of our county administrator. So it seems logical that we would want to appeal this ordinance, but I haven't actually seen the whole thing. Are the parts that are crossed out and are you suggesting we just change the language in the ordinance or that we repeal the whole thing?
You're muted, Mr. Langrick.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Glassbrenner. Madam Chair, ordinance number 2026 was an amendment to existing ordinance 86.6 and 88.3. The amendments is what you're seeing is what is adopted. The changes were made to take out the administrative coordinator title and then to reappropriate the duties left remaining here to the county clerk. So the two sections that are left then is to administer the insurance programs seen in section A, and then to assist the county administrator with preparation of the annual budget, but then also then to monitor implementation of the adopted budget to assure that all expenditures of the county funds are made in compliance with the allocations of the budget. So essentially running the day-to-day budget and overseeing the accounts receivable payables as well as the accountant supervisor. So with still, as we clear up where the functions and the position titles are going to end up, this is a piece of ordinance that we still have out here giving directives to the county clerk. Madam Chair.
So are we, at this point in time with what we've done so far through this committee and through the board last week, I believe that we for sure can get rid of the language about insurance. I mean, we could repeal the whole, I guess my question is my understanding is I think we could repeal this entire ordinance because we have now shifted this responsibility to the county administrator. Am I wrong in that?
I think that seems logical.
I'm just finishing reading through it.
May I ask
is your recommendation to amend or repeal?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking Mr. Langrick.
Okay.
Sorry.
My recommendation is if you would like the insurance functions to also fall onto myself, from what I'm, with the moves of the accountant supervisor position, infers that the financial functions are coming towards my way, and the HR functions with the accounts payable position, how the functions of the accounts, the payroll and benefits position coming my way is HR functions, obviously implied with that, with the accounts payable specialist position kind of still out there. I'm assuming that if we're adopting intention languages to have all of it underneath myself, that in some way, shape, or form, the functions or person doing that migrates this way as well. So the insurance piece kind of hasn't been specifically addressed, but if that's the intentions, then I would recommend repealing this ordinance.
Can I ask what's the original intention of this? Why was it originally amended to leave this in the county clerk's or, you know, include county clerk on this. I don't remember when that was done or what the intention was behind it.
So, Mr. Langrick, please correct me if I'm wrong, but when we first hired our county administrator, this resolution, what we had on file, giving the authority of the clerk to be our administrative coordinator. When he first came on, we had talked about repealing the entire resolution. However, because there was going to be this transitional period where the administrator was learning and figuring out how all the things worked, the decision was made to not remove all of the duties, but to leave some of them with the clerk, because the staff was still, the financial staff and HR staff were still working under the clerk. And so that is why we left some of this language intact when it was last revised. Is that correct, Mr. Langrick?
That is how I understand it as well, Madam Chair. And historically, obviously, this comes from a previous, prior to an administrator model. There was an administrative coordinator model, which was another hat that Victor had wore. And so then this original resolution of 86.6 and then amended in 88.3 kind of defined what the role of an administrative coordinator was, Madam Chair.
So it seems reasonable to me that we could take action on this item where we recommend that we repeal this ordinance, because we've now mostly transitioned to all of these duties. Are you comfortable with taking on the insurance role at this point?
It's something I would expect to transition over as well, a learning part of it, to pick up on it. It adds more to the plate, but if that's the intentions of the committee and board, then yes, I will take it on.
Well, I hesitate to add more to your plate. So is there any downside to leaving this resolution as it is, or this ordinance as it is for now, until we can perhaps get the HR and finance transition well on its way?
The current ordinance would dictate kind of that the clerk is responsible for monitoring the kind of the day-to-days, whether or not that causes a conflict of interest. I'm hoping that Victor is very well involved in the daily operations for quite some time as we try to learn and adapt to new systems, with myself being new and not even having anybody in the accountant supervisor position. So whether it really causes a conflict at this point, I don't foresee it, but then again, I don't know how it's going to play out.
Would you prefer that we repeal the parts that pertain to the budget and leave the insurance part intact for now?
I'm comfortable with that as well. That's okay with me.
I agree with Supervisor Glassbrenner. I think that that's a good idea, that we repeal the financial language, but leave the insurance in place for now.
Call.
And we can, unless someone else has a comment. Supervisor Turk, was that you?
No, that was Bob. I think that's a good direction. I like that idea.
Well, I would make that motion then to repeal the language that pertains to the budget in ordinance 2026 and leave then the insurance statement for now.
I would second
Do I
that.
have a second?
I would second that.
All right, any further discussion on that? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right. So that we would send on to finance, is that correct?
Madam Chair, this is
Yeah.
Supervisor Brewer. I have to leave the meeting right now. I'm sorry. I have driver's ed
Okay.
students waiting.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
All right, Administrator Langrick, would you like to keep going on to the next section here?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and we're getting near the end of it. I appreciate everybody's patience. The next section here is additional directives regarding continuity and transition of functions. The following are put out as proposed directives to help with the transition and ensuring that it's being done in a responsible type of a manner to meet the intentions of the board. First directive to the county clerk. The county clerk will continue with involvement with the county financials, HR, and insurances in the role of teaching, coaching, advising the county administrator. The county clerk will report to the Finance and Personnel Committee regarding the status of transitioning the functions. A directive to the administrator. The county administrator will work with the county clerk, ensuring that all information is accessible. For brevity's sake, moving on to the next one. The next one for the directive to the county clerk is county clerk will maintain roles supporting the data entry into the financial systems until the arrival of a new county supervisor. Next is a directive to the administrator. The administrator will work with the county clerk to provide staffing support elections. Next is a directive to the administrator. The administrator will work with the county clerk on identifying budgetary impacts and bring forward amended budgets reflecting the changes. Next is a directive to the county administrator, which deals with ensuring that supporting agencies are aware of our changes in roles and that we have all appropriate signature authorities and point of contacts established with our different organizations. And then the final one is a directive to the county clerk will retain current ancillary office functions not covered by this plan and will work with the administrator to transition these functions as appropriate. Madam Chair.
What I really like about this is it really clearly indicates that we are instructing the county administrator and the county clerk and county employees to work together to get this accomplished. So I think that it is important to have these things written out in such a clear manner. So if nothing else comes out of this today, I would definitely like to see these directives go before finance and then onto the board if that's where they should go. But I'm interested in other members' thoughts.
How do you perceive these objectives to be presented? Is this by a resolution? What's your vision on how this gets done?
I mean, if that was for me, Supervisor Frank, like my vision was to have a complete plan, and by resolution, the county board adopting this plan. Some of the different pieces would have to go. That would be an ordinance on the side, though, to repeal the ordinance. But essentially, the county board's adopting this plan. We understand what's in this plan. In this plan is our intentions and these other directives, and it all comes forward in one package. Is how I initially perceived it. But if we take out bits and pieces, we can work with that as well.
Well, I think as a whole, the document is great. I think that the main issue, because I think I haven't heard from Supervisor Turk, but I'm assuming that we all would agree with these directives that you just read. I think those are excellent. I think the one question then would be that position moving, sharing, creating. So I guess if we could clarify that, then potentially we could pass the document as a whole, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I'm not sure that we're there where we're going to be able to particular sticking point right now, but other than that, I agree. I think the rest of the document is very well laid out and gives us a very thoughtful plan as to how to move forward.
So, Madam Chair, just to finish with the plan, then the next session is just our resources and references that we were looking at and that we've had discussion on from previous meetings. Authority of the county board to amend position assignments within the county. We've identified the one state statute that says the board has the ability to establish a number of employees. We also have language in our Richland County Handbook of Management that essentially says the employer has the right to reassign employees. We do have a mandate of a deputy clerk, as we had talked about with State Statute 5923, as well as all the statutory duties of imposed in 5923. And just to iterate then, our strategic plan of transitioning this was number 2 on our strategic plan. We've talked with our own Corporation Counsel Attorney Southwick, as well as Wisconsin Counties Association Attorney Phillips. And then oversight for communication, this last bit then just kind of reaffirms that the finance and personnel is kind of tasked with the actual oversight on the transition. Issues that cannot be resolved should be brought to the finance and personnel, and that the finance and personnel committee will be delivering monthly reports. So again, this plan is kind of put in context where it's seen as this committee teeing up the plan and then executing and monitoring the plan is passed off to finance and personnel. And again, I'm not sure if that's the full intentions or not, but that's what I've kind of gathered from our different structure language. And if this needs to be changed and it's more seen as an intimate thing to this body versus finance and personnel, then we can adjust for that as well, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask a quick question, Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
On this last section there that you just read, the E and H, can I ask where those came from? I maybe missed it when I was reading through. It was a lot to digest, but I just was trying to figure out where E and H came from.
Madam Chair, I can answer that. The E and H bullets are taken from the Richland County Committee structure document, which lists out the different tasks, responsibilities, and duties for the committees, the standing committees in the county.
Thank you.
All right, so I think at this point we need to go back to the one area that we have some questions and concerns, and that would be, yeah, that right there. Supervisor Turk, I guess I'd really like to hear a little bit more from you. I mean, I agree that I think that we're understaffed in finance, and that, you know, I think in a perfect world we would add this position to the administrator's office, and then we could just create a new deputy clerk position. But that's not necessarily where we are. So I would guess I would like to know your support. Like, do you support creating a new position, or what are your thoughts?
I guess my feeling coming into this is creating new positions wasn't necessarily what we set out to do. I'm not saying that I don't feel it could be justified given the amount of work and everything, but that feels like a step beyond to me. My thought is, you know, focus on, okay, we had 3 positions. How do we properly line those up to start with? If we then identify that, okay, 3 is not enough, we do need a 4th position in this mix, then we have to make the case for it and find the money.
Okay, so let's have the conversation. That accounts payable specialist position, as described by Amy Lewis, who is currently in that position, where do we feel that position is appropriate? Given her comments on how much time she spends doing financial duties, is it appropriate that that position, in a perfect world, would simply belong in the county administrator's office with the other financial and payroll benefit specialist positions?
I would go back to a point I made earlier. Are we talking position or are we talking duties?
Well,
because if you're going to move that position, then you're precluding yourself. You're saying you're going to create another one because then there are no positions left in the clerk's office.
And that is exactly the question I'm asking right now. In a perfect world, if we were doing this with money not a consideration, do we think that that position belongs in the administrator's office? And that position includes just the financial, I mean, if you want to talk about duties, then it would only be those top 4 financial bullet duties, which apparently take 80+% of the time for that person to perform. So I guess this question would be more directed to the Supervisors Glassbrenner and Frank.
I would agree if you're talking about the duties. I am kind of where Dave is at, or Mr. Turk, I'm sorry, that I can't see adding another. Thanks. I can't see adding that position yet, because I think, like he said, we have to make a case for that. We have to have our 3 functioning employees. So yes, I agree with you, Melissa, but I don't know what that looks like practically, because if we move that whole position over, then we have no deputy clerk.
Correct. Which would mean we would have to create a position. So I mean, I'm asking this as a hypothetical. If you didn't have to take finances into consideration, where would you put this position? And to me, it looks pretty clear that it is a mostly financial position with some potential time to do some administrative duties that the administrator also needs. And so it would be a full-time position that would go with the accounting supervisor and payroll. So there would be 3 positions there. However, I think many county board supervisors, myself included, have some concerns with creating a new position, which is what we would have to do if we transferred that position 100% out of that office. So then the question becomes, what other options are there that are realistic?
Madam Chair, this
option
is
that
Sean Murphy Lopez. Do you mind if
Yeah.
I just give my thoughts on this?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm one of those supervisors who shares that concern about adding new positions given our financial challenges. And as I've heard your thoughts, you were saying that you had initially imagined this as a 50-50 position before you found out from Ms. Lewis that she was really working on finances more between 80 and 90% of the time. But I don't really think that that changes much except for your percentage split. So, to me, the easiest option would be to create a shared position so that the accounts payable specialist remains, just say, roughly 80%, doing finances, and 20% helping the clerk out. And another, get where Supervisor Glassbrenner is coming from on this point. She's thinking, okay, the clerk is doing the accounting supervisor job right now. Maybe there will be more opportunity. Maybe he will have less on his plate once that position gets filled. And that might create less of a need for a full-time deputy clerk position. I'm not sure if that's where she was going, but that's where my head was going as I was listening to this.
That's it exactly.
And
thank you.
Okay. And, the other thing is, as the weeks go by here, things keep changing pretty rapidly. It feels like they keep changing more quickly. And one of the things that changed with the Finance and Personnel Committee last week is that the clerk is no longer taking the minutes for that meeting. I'm not sure what's going to happen with rules and resolutions. I haven't had that conversation with him yet. So there may be other opportunities where the clerk may be able to take on some of those his 3 staff members did if his financial. So I remember earlier on said, I thought maybe, Dave, you were kind of implying it's hard to figure out what the FTE need for the deputy clerk position is at this moment today. And I would really agree with that. But for the time being, it might be good just to leave, him with at least 0.2 FTE, with knowing that also there's that language about directing the administrator to make the 3 staff available for help with elections. That's a big nut to crack as well. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Right. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
I need to leave the meeting. I've got a work commitment I need to go to now. But I would be wary of slashing back a deputy position to a 0.2 FTE. I think that's inviting trouble.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I have to depart now.
All right.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I have to leave as well to pick up kids. Yeah.
All right, which means we would be losing our quorum. So I guess can we potentially set a meeting for next week to continue this discussion, to keep the ball rolling?
Let's do that. It
okay.
Works.
All right, so before everyone has to leave, I think we have to adjourn. What time do you have to leave exactly, Ingrid?
Well, anytime here, but could I just suggest, for as far as things to look at, I don't know if it's possible to explore. I know we mentioned this before, and this may not be practical, but potentially moving the duties. We were talking about positions versus the actual duties. I don't know if we need to look at how we could move duties, if that even makes sense.
You mean restructure the duties to create some open time that then could be given to the deputy clerk?
Right.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I don't want to get too much, so we have given the authority to the county administrator to write job descriptions. So I don't know that this committee needs to write a job description, but I agree, understanding what those duties are is really helpful. So I think that will be helpful in us furthering this discussion. So do we want to send out just a doodle poll to everyone to get dates for next week?
That works for
That's-
Bob.
However,
And-
Administrator Langrick can contact us all, or do we know a date right now that works? Because I know, Ingrid, you have to go.
It's fine. I
We
can
can work
actually,
it out offline.
okay. Yeah, I know Dave and Marty are not here, so I think maybe just send out the.
Okay.
online.
All right, and Administrator Langrick, the other thing that we need to have on our future agenda would be the report that I wrote that was presented to the county board does need to be reviewed by this committee. So we should do that next time as well. All right, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
This is Bob. Also move.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you,
Opposed?
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.